So, what was your childhood like?
So I grew up in this neighborhood. My mom still lives in the same apartment that I grew up in, small tenement. There was no gallery and poodles around here. It was a lot of drugs. It was a lot of drug addicts. There's still a lot of drugs, but I mean, I'm talking about like people lining up for heroin, 50 to 100 people in a line. You know, going to Tompkins Square Park, getting the fresh needles, and every 10 steps you took was a heroin needle on the ground, you know, and that's what we grew up seeing. You know, I remember being a kid and telling people I wanted to be rich when they told me what I wanted to do when I grew up. Like, drugs was the first avenue, and you know, by the age of 19, I was making over $2 million a year. I had over 20 people working for me. We were generating about $5 million in revenue. We had we were not just only dealing in the Lower East Side. We started a whole delivery service across the whole city in different areas, and it was crazy. It was a crazy operation.
New York State legalized marijuana in 2021, a substance that Marte first sold. On March 10, 2022, New York Governor Kathy Hochul announced that the first dispensary licenses will go to previously incarcerated people and their families. People like Cos Marte.
My first reaction towards the legislations of, you know, marijuana and being allowed to, you know, potentially run the first dispensaries was, I was surprised, I was excited. I was thinking about running a dispensary even if we were not the first ones.
The idea behind this legislation came from the history of disproportionate policing and arrests of Black and Hispanic people, especially with drug charges. In New York City, Black people were arrested on low-level marijuana charges at 8 times the rate of white people from 2015 to 2018. Around the time Marte was growing up, 85% of the state's prison population was Black or Latino, and 75% of them came from 7 neighborhoods in New York City, those being South Bronx, South Jamaica, Bedford-Stuyvesant, East New York, Brownsville, Lower East Side, and Harlem.
And we were over-policed. You know, I remember going to school multiple times and just being placed on a wall and just get searched. And then they found a bag of weed, and now I'm going into the prison system, you know, the jail system. And, you know, I hope I could be, you know, a potential like poster child to demonstrate that we could be as smart and business savvy enough to run a dispensary.
One part of the new legislation for the application process is that applicants have to show proof of at least 10% ownership interest in a qualifying business for a minimum of 2 years. Luckily for Marte, he checks this box too. Marte founded ConBody, a fitness studio that teaches a no-equipment, prison-style workout.
So we're at ConBody. It's in the Lower East Side of New York City, where I was born, raised, still live here. Most likely gonna die here. But yeah, this is our facility. We're running classes right behind me. This is the waiting area, and this is what we do. Yeah. I was incarcerated in 2009 and sentenced to 7 years in prison. And in there was when I found out I had a lot of health issues. Doctors in prison told me my cholesterol levels were really through the roof, and if I didn't start eating correctly or exercising, that I could probably die of a heart attack. And in prison, I didn't get the best food, but I made better decisions, and I worked out obsessively. And I managed to lose over 70 pounds in 6 months.
Unlike other fitness studios, Marte's studio aims to educate their clients. On the walls, there are statistics about the discrepancy of race in prisons. Similar to the aims of the new legislation hoping to help out formerly incarcerated individuals, Marte employs people returning back to society.
You know, I'm happy that I could employ people that have been incarcerated. You know, if you put a lot of hard work into it, you can make it happen. And I want to make an easier path for people coming out of the system.
Some people, however, are not supportive of the new bill. According to pollster Stephen Greenberg, only 33% of New York voters support the new legislation. 54% are opposed and 13% are not sure. In addition, 48% of Black voters and 52% of Hispanic voters are in support. In contrast, only 29% of white voters are in support. One obstacle that storefront hopefuls have to traverse is real estate. Included in the legislation is that dispensaries have to be 500 feet away from schools and 200 feet away from any place of worship. This leaves not much space for storefronts, which influences some people to not even apply in the first place. Parks like Washington Square Park are where some sellers operate now.
It'd make this a lot easier, but at the same time, opening a store would be like a lot of money and all that. And then all the bullshit they're probably going to make you go through. We read an article that people were doing it in the park, and we were like, hey, that sounds like, prime real estate. So we came out here, tried our luck at it, and we're out here like 3-4 days a week.
Overall, the main goal of the legislation is to provide some reparations to communities that have suffered due to over-policing. But if this is enough remains unclear.
No, I think this is not enough reparations for people, black and brown people, that have been stigmatized and discriminated, and I felt like we've lived a life sentence, even if we didn't get that life sentence with that stamp of a felony on our back, But I think it's a good start.